Dawn broke slowly over the Marathon plain, brushing the land with a pale gold light that felt almost too calm for what was about to come. A cold wind swept across the tall grass, carrying with it the metallic clatter of shields being adjusted, armor shifting and the steady breaths of thousands of men trying to silence their fear. Rows of Athenian and Plataean hoplites stood shoulder to shoulder, their bronze helmets gleaming faintly in the early light, their eyes fixed on the vast sea of tents and soldiers belonging to the greatest empire the world had ever known. The morning felt suspended in time, balanced between dread and destiny, and in that fragile stillness, one question hung in the air like a whisper from the future. How could a battle that lasted less than a single day change the entire direction of Western history? To understand the answer, we must return to the world as it was then, a world where the Persian Empire stretched from the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of India. Under the rule of Darius, the first Persia commanded armies that numbered in tens of thousands, armies that moved with discipline, confidence, and a sense of inevitability. When such a force set its eyes on a small rising city like Athens, the outcome seemed already written. Athens at this time was not a mighty capital. It was a young city-state, experimenting with a new idea government by its citizens. Democracy was just beginning to take shape, fragile and imperfect, but full of promise. And now this small community found itself facing the full weight of the Persian Empire. One side wielded overwhelming power, the other held only their shields, their spears, and a belief that freedom was worth defending. This story will bring to life the atmosphere of that pivotal moment. It will guide listeners through the emotions, doubts, strategies, and the unforgettable characters who stood at the heart of it all. Miltiades, the Athenian commander burdened by responsibility; Darius I, the Persian king seeking retribution; Phidippides, the tireless messenger who carried Athens' hope across mountains; and the hoplites, ordinary citizens willing to risk everything. By the end, we will understand why those few hours on the Marathon plain echo across the centuries. But before the battle, there was fear. And fear began in the halls and streets of Athens. News spread quickly that Persian ships had been spotted approaching the Attic coast. In the agora, where citizens gathered to debate, voices rose in worry. Should they submit? Should they evacuate? Or should they meet the threat head-on? The weight of the moment pressed on every heart. Miltiades stepped forward as the man willing to lead. His voice was steady, but the responsibility tightened in his chest. He knew the odds. He knew the risks. Yet he also knew that if Athens fell, the dream of citizenship and freedom might fall with it. He argued that they must fight not only for survival, but for the right to shape their own destiny. Help came from an unexpected place. The small city of Plataea, loyal to Athens, sent 1,000 hoplites to stand beside them. Their arrival brought a moment of hope, a reminder that unity among Greeks was possible even in the darkest hour. Meanwhile, Phidippides, the swift runner, was sent on a desperate mission to Sparta. His path was long and unforgiving, stretching across rugged landscapes. His feet blistered, his breath grew heavy, but he carried with him the plea of an entire people: stand with us, or we may not survive. Though Sparta could not march immediately, the journey itself became part of Athens' resolve. All of this led to the plain of Marathon. There the land stretched wide and open, bordered by hills on one side and the sea on the other. The Persian army had already landed, setting up endless rows of white tents that rippled like waves under the wind. The sight was overwhelming, a reminder of the power poised against them. Yet the Athenians held their ground. They stood firm, knowing the day ahead could define their future. And as the Athenians stood facing the vast Persian camp, the true weight of the coming battle settled into their bones, leading them toward the one thing that could keep them alive: preparation. The strength of the Greek army did not lie in numbers or in wealth or in the reach of an empire. It lay in the phalanx, the formation that turned individual citizens into a single, unbreakable force. To understand what the Athenians prepared that night, imagine hundreds of shields overlapping so tightly that no light could slip through. Each shield was wide and heavy, designed not only to protect the man holding it, but also the man standing beside him. The long spear, its bronze tip polished and sharp, extended outward like the quills of a giant metal creature. The armor was thick an unforgiving, bronze, cuirass greaves, helmet with a narrow eye slit. It was not meant to be comfortable. It was meant to turn an ordinary person into part of a moving fortress. The phalanx demanded absolute discipline. A hoplite who panicked did not put only himself at risk, he endangered everyone. This simple truth bound the men together more tightly than any oath. They feared what was ahead, but fear did not scatter them. Instead, it pushed them closer, shield to shield, breath to breath. Miltiades knew this was their greatest weapon. While the Persian army excelled in mobility and long-range attacks, the Greeks excelled in unity formation and sheer determination. As he studied the Persian lines, he recognized a clear imbalance. The Persian center was strong and densely packed while their flanks were lighter. If the Greeks matched them evenly, they would be overwhelmed in the middle. But Miltiades did not intend to fight evenly. He planned to reshape the formation itself. On the night before the battle, the commanders gathered around a crackling fire. Shadows danced on their armor as the flames flickered across their faces. Some looked anxious, others focused, but all listened intently. Miltiades laid out the plan in a low, steady voice. He would thin the center of the Athenian line, reducing its depth. It was a risk those in the center would be exposed to the strongest part of the Persian attack. But on the flanks, he would reinforce the ranks, doubling their strength. The goal was simple. The center would hold just long enough for the two wings to sweep inward and surround the Persian army. A murmur ran through the group as they absorbed the strategy. It was audacious, even dangerous. But they also knew it was their one chance to counter the Persian advantage. Slowly, one by one, the officers nodded. The firelight reflected in their eyes, mixing fear with determination. The contrast between the two sides could not have been sharper. The Persian army was swift and flexible with light armor and skilled archers, whose arrows had already conquered countless lands. Their foot soldiers moved quickly, adapting with ease. The Athenians, by comparison, were slower, heavier, burdened by armor that restricted movement. But in formation, they became something immovable, a human wall designed to withstand impact. As the night faded toward dawn, a restless quiet settled across the Greek camp. Hoplites lay awake beneath the stars, each man listening to the rhythmic beat of his own heart. Some whispered short prayers. Others stared into the darkness, imagining their families back in Athens. Beneath every helmet lay a swirl of emotions, courage, fear, resolve, all balanced on the edge of the coming day. Then came the moments before sunrise, when the world feels strangely still. Time seemed to slow. The air grew colder. Every small sound, the soft clink of armor, the steady breathing of the soldiers, felt amplified. It was a silence, not of peace but of anticipation, a silence before the storm. And when the silence finally broke, it shattered like glass. Miltiades gave the signal. At first, the Greek line moved forward in steady, disciplined steps. But then, just as the Persians began to draw their bows, the Athenians surged into a full run. It was a decision as daring as the formation itself. Hoplites weighed down with armor sprinted across the open plain, their feet pounding the earth in a rolling thunder that grew louder with every stride. The sound rippled over the fields of Marathon like the approach of a living storm. The Persians watched in disbelief. No army had ever charged them this way. Arrows arced upward, filling the sky in a dark haze. But the Greeks were already moving too fast. The distance closed rapidly. Each hoplite felt the burn in his lungs, the strain on his legs, the beating of his heart echoing inside his bronze helmet. Their shouts blended into one unified roar, raw, determined, and impossible to ignore. Then came the moment of impact. The front ranks collided with a force that felt almost physical in the air itself. Shields locked against shields. Spears met resistance. The sound was not sharp, but heavy, like wood and metal clashing in a slow, crushing rhythm. The Greeks pushed as one, leaning into their shields, bracing against the pressure. The Persians tried to push back, but their lighter gear could not anchor them in place. The central line of the Greeks, thinner by design, struggled first. The Persians pressed hard their numbers and speed, giving them an early advantage. The line bowed inward slightly, exactly as Miltiades had planned. It was dangerous, but it was also the trap. On the Greek wings, everything shifted. The reinforced flanks, twice as deep, moved with controlled power. Hoplites advanced in tight formation, pushing the Persian wings backward. The Persians, accustomed to fighting more flexible opponents, found themselves pressed by a wall that refused to bend. Foot by foot, the Greeks on the wings drove them back. Then the trap snapped shut. With the Persian flanks collapsing, the Greek wings curved inward like arms closing around an opponent. The Persians at the center suddenly found themselves pressed from three sides. Their formation faltered. Confusion spread. Commanders shouted orders, but the momentum had shifted. What began as a confident advance turned into a desperate effort to regroup. The Greeks did not give them the chance. Step by step, shield by shield, they pushed forward, tightening the circle. The Persians attempted to pull back toward the safety of their ships, but the plain was crowded, and panic moved faster than discipline. Dust filled the air as thousands tried to retreat at once. In the distance, Persian crews rushed to prepare the ships. Soldiers ran toward the shoreline, scrambling over the sand as they tried to reach the vessels. The Greek wings continued to press forward, moving with steady determination, forcing the Persians closer to the water. And then, almost as suddenly as it began, it was over. The Persians broke away, completely retreating toward their ships in disarray. Some vessels managed to pull away from the shore, while others struggled under the weight of men trying to board. The Athenians, exhausted and breathless, held their position on the beach, watching the last of the Persian ships drift away. The battlefield became quiet again, but this time it was a different silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence that follows after giving everything a person has to give. Men dropped to their knees, their chests rising and falling in heavy breaths. Some stared out at the sea in disbelief. Others turned to the hills where Athens lay, beyond imagining how the city would react when they heard what had happened. In just a few hours, a smaller force had stopped one of the greatest empires of the ancient world, and as the sun climbed higher, touching the plain with warm light, the hoplites of Athens and Plataea felt something rising in them, exhaustion, relief, and a quiet sense of triumph that words could not fully capture. They had stood their ground, they had endured, they had changed history, and as the last Persian ships slipped beyond the horizon, the Athenians finally allowed themselves to breathe. The dust settled slowly across the plain, revealing what remained after the storm. Victory had come, but it had come with a weight that could not be ignored. When the Athenians began to gather their fallen, the numbers told a story all their own. 192 men from Athens lay still on the field, along with 11 more from Plataea. Each loss was deeply felt, each name carried the weight of someone's son, brother, or friend. Yet when they looked across the plain toward where the Persians had fought, they saw the stark contrast. Estimates later suggested that over 6,000 Persian soldiers had fallen before their retreat. The difference was overwhelming, almost difficult to comprehend. Somehow, against the vast power of an empire, this citizen army had held the line, but the Athenians did not look at the battlefield with arrogance. What they felt instead was something quieter, deeper, a sense that what they had done reached beyond the moment. They had not only defended their land, they had defended an idea. The idea that free citizens could stand together and protect their own future. The idea that courage, unity, and determination could matter more than sheer numbers. As the hoplites began their slow march back toward the city, another story unfolded on the edges of history, one carried on weary feet. Phidippides, the swift runner who had traveled to Sparta days earlier, now found himself facing one final task. According to legend, when the dust of battle cleared, he was chosen to bring the news home. Athens needed to know that their sons had prevailed, that the threat of destruction had been turned aside. So he ran. He ran over the same hills and winding paths he had crossed before his body drained his muscles raw from days of effort. Each step was a struggle, but each step also carried the heartbeat of victory. The sun beat down on him. His breath came in bursts. Yet he pushed forward, driven not by orders but by the weight of what the victory meant. When he reached the city, the people rushed toward him, their faces filled with fear, hope, and desperate questions. Phidippides, exhausted beyond measure, summoned the last of his strength. In a voice strained but bright, with pride, he delivered the message the city needed to hear: "We have won." Those words echoed like a promise. Though the legend has taken different forms over time, the symbolism remained powerful, one citizen carrying the voice of an entire army, reminding Athens that their courage had shaped their destiny. News of the victory spread quickly across the city. Relief washed over the people first, then disbelief, then something few had ever felt before, a growing confidence that Athens was capable of standing among the great powers of the world, not because of a king, not because of wealth, but because its citizens had fought for their own freedom and succeeded. Meanwhile, on the distant sea, the Persian fleet changed course. The campaign was over. The empire that had seemed unstoppable had been turned back by a single day's resistance. Darius would not continue the march to Athens. The threat that had hung over the entire region began to fade. In the days that followed, the Athenians buried their fallen with honor. A communal tomb was raised on the plain of Marathon, a reminder that those who fought were not professional soldiers but regular citizens who chose duty over safety. As Athens returned to its daily rhythm, something new pulsed beneath the surface of the city. A sense of purpose, a belief that they had earned their place in history. The victory at Marathon marked the beginning of a new era, an era when Athens would step boldly into the world, shaping ideas and institutions that would echo far into the future. And though the hoplites walked back into their city covered in dust and sweat, they carried with them a truth that would outlast empires. They had stood together and they had prevailed. And as the Athenians walked back into their city carrying the weight of victory, the true impact of what they had achieved had not yet taken shape. The battle was over, the celebration was real, but the meaning, the deep lasting meaning, was only beginning to unfold. The victory at Marathon did more than protect a city, it protected an idea. Athens was still experimenting with this fragile concept called democracy, where citizens shared responsibility for their own future. Had Persia won on that plain, the city might have been brought under imperial control, its newfound political system crushed before it ever had the chance to grow. Marathon, in a very real sense, safeguarded the possibility of democratic governance. It kept alive the belief that people could rule themselves, debate freely, and determine their own destiny. In the years that followed, something extraordinary happened. Athens did not remain, simply relieved, it rose. The generation that survived Marathon and the one that came after carried an unshakable confidence. They had faced one of the greatest powers on earth and emerged standing. That belief fueled a cultural and intellectual surge that would become known as the Golden Age of Athens. Art blossomed. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle would later challenge the world to think differently. Architects built monuments like the Parthenon, symbols of balance, beauty, and civic pride. Playwrights shaped stories that still resonate across time. None of this happened in a vacuum. It grew from a community inspired by the knowledge that citizens could protect their own freedom. And woven through it all was the spirit of Marathon. The battle became more than a military victory. It became a symbol of standing firm when the odds are overwhelming. It represented the idea that courage and unity could turn the tide of history. Over centuries, writers, thinkers, and leaders looked back at Marathon as the moment when the future of Greek and eventually Western civilization pivoted. Without Marathon, the cultural foundations that influence modern law, art, philosophy, and politics might never have taken root. That influence didn't stop in antiquity. For many in the modern Western world, especially in the United States, the story of Marathon echoes values that feel deeply familiar: freedom, determination. The belief that ordinary citizens can rise together when the stakes are high. The idea that people can fight not for conquest or glory, but for the right to shape their own future. These are themes woven into the American identity as strongly as they were woven into Athens after the battle. When Americans hear the story of Marathon, they often recognize something of themselves in it: a commitment to liberty, a respect for civic responsibility, and a quiet understanding that real progress often demands courage. Marathon becomes not just a story from long ago, but a mirror reflecting enduring ideals. And so, as this journey comes to its final moments, we return to the plain of Marathon, quiet, now marked only by ancient earth and distant memories. Looking across that landscape, it becomes clear that Marathon was never just a battle. It was a testament to what people can accomplish when they stand together with purpose, guided by belief and strengthened by unity. If you were standing on that plain on that morning with the wind brushing across the fields and the sea glittering in the distance, what would you have felt? Fear, hope, resolve? Perhaps all three, just as the Athenians did. And now, as we close this chapter of history, one message lingers. When people believe in something greater than themselves, when they choose courage over fear and unity over surrender, they can change the world even in a single day. If you want to continue exploring moments like this, moments that shaped humanity and still speak to us today, follow the channel and join us for the next story.